Hi, my name's Kara. I hope you can't tell that I'm not wearing pants because it's hot in here. I was overheating filming my haul just before, but today we are talking about The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. Let's get started. This overall, just to set the tone, ended up being a 4-star book for me, but until maybe the last 50 or 100 pages, it was a solid 3. So that gives an idea of my thoughts coming into it, but let's go. I have my notes just sitting over there and let's get going. So the premise of this novel is that we have Nari, our main character, who is Egyptian from Cairo. She's a con woman with some mysterious abilities despite the fact that she doesn't believe in magic, which had me kind of like eye rolling at the start. Like, she can understand any language spoken to her, which, you know, most people can't do. And she can also heal both herself and others. And she kind of just plays it all off as just something she can do and tries not to think too hard about it. And like adamantly insists she doesn't believe in magic. And she is working in the streets of Cairo as a con woman, using her healing prowess to con people out of their riches. And then in a ceremony where she's meant to be healing a girl who it's kind of implied has a disability, which she knows she can do nothing about, she accidentally summons a warrior jinn, or deva as they are called in this book. And from there, adventures ensue as she is also kind of at the mercy of a bunch of, what are they called? Ifrit. And the jinn Dara escapes with her and runs off with her to the city of Daevabad, which is the Deva, like, home city. And most of the adventure takes place in Deva. We also follow an alternate perspective, oh, I keep losing the book at the bottom, of Ali, who is a Deva prince, who's the youngest prince of the ruling family, and you kind of see from his perspective a lot of the politics of the Deva world, and in particular there's a lot of like tribes or factions which are all kind of against each other, and that really is a large focus of Ali's perspective. I should also say that this book is a retelling or reimagining of one of the stories in 1001 Nights. I realise I always think of it as 1001 Arabian Nights, but that's because the copy I used to own a long while ago before it got very gross was 1001 Arabian Nights, but it was a very old copy. It's probably not PC, is that right? Someone please let me know about that. So let's start with what I thought of the characters. Personally, for most of this book, I found Nari a little insufferable. I think that was mainly because of her insistence that magic wasn't real and her inability to quite comprehend what was happening, even though it seemed quite obvious, and she was meant to be very cluey. Obviously she's a con woman, so I found that a little bit eye-rolly. A lot of the other characters are much more believable and their motives seem more genuine, I guess. Also, the main jinn Deva that is looking after Nari, Dara, is also a little insufferable, but Nari actively calls him out on it, which made that a little bit better. And also his story as it develops over the course of the novel really explains that more. So overall I thought the characters were alright, though I thought their character development in the last third of the book was very strong, and it got them to places I was very happy with. I think my main problem was that where most of the characters were at the start of the story wasn't where I wanted them to be. In contrast to that, the setting and the world building was very rich. We have, most of the book takes place in Daevabad, the Jinn Deva city, and the way it was described and the way the magic of the Deva were described was so well done, so rich, so complex. I think my only problems were with occasional terminology issues, where the same words were used by different people to describe different things. And although it was consistent, it took me a while to kind of get my head around it, which is probably my only fault with world building. This has a very strong political focus, and that's the avenue through which a lot of the world building is done, and I think that really worked. Now to the plot. I did find the pacing a little bit strange, particularly in the first section of the book, though throughout the whole book it had these weird little time jumps that never quite sat right with me. So at the end of every scene or chapter, there could be potentially quite long gaps in time. Like there's scenes that it felt to me like it was no more than a week. And then there was an explicit mention of it having been like 3 months, which was like the traveling scenes with Nari and Dara to get to Daevabad from Cairo. And that kind of happened throughout, that large periods of time would pass, but without it being very clear initially. And so for the first couple of paragraphs of a chapter, I'd be assuming that we were carrying on directly from what had just happened just before, and then suddenly get a little clue that actually we're a week or a month in the future. And I kind of wish there was maybe some chapter headings that kept track of the time to make that a little easier, because I found it definitely threw off my internal clock for the pacing of this book. It also meant that I found that the kind of low-key romance between Dara and Nari felt very insta-lovey. They kind of have a bit of a fling very early on while they're traveling from Cairo to Daevabad, like I mentioned before, which to me felt like it took no more than a week of book time, but actually took 3 months. So when they're suddenly kissing, I thought it came out of nowhere a little bit, which I think may have been helped if there was a clear indicator of that passage of time, because the 3-month indicator that came up was past, like way later in the book, where it talked about their 3-month journey. And I definitely didn't feel until that point that that journey had taken them 3 months. So pacing, I think, was the biggest thing that bothered me with this book, and that was a very internal problem, rather than, like, the book did spell it out, but not in the places that signposted to me properly. I also found the 2 points of view at the start of the book pretty difficult to tie together to make a coherent story, because we're following Nari and Ali, who are experiencing very different things until they come together, and explanations that made sense in one plot line didn't necessarily relate that well to the other plot line. But this was especially true with what I mentioned earlier about the same words being used to describe different things. So in Nari's timeline, Dara uses the word Deva to describe all jinn, and so Deva overall in the book is used to describe all jinn most of the time, by some people, depending on what political faction you're a part of, and Dara always refers to all jinn as Deva. Jinn is a low term for Deva, and would never use the term jinn. And then his tribe or faction is also called Deva. But then Ali is from a different tribe or faction, and he refers to most jinn as Deva normally, but also uses the term jinn happily, and then has his own names for tribes, but mainly uses Deva to refer to the faction Deva. So trying to nut out how all those worked didn't work well in my head, and confused me a lot, especially at the start where the world building was happening, because it happened very slowly. So trying to nut out what meant what took a while, and even though there's a glossary at the end of this book, that didn't help well with that Deva distinction. I think that would have been clearer maybe if there was a index of the different tribes. That would have been very useful, I think, in this book. However, the ending was very strong, especially once the 2 plot lines of Ali and Nari came together. From that point on, it was amazing, and very fast-paced. In like the last 50 pages especially, the pace was insane, and there were so many twists and reveals. I did guess some of them, but it didn't matter because they were good and what made sense. And I'm definitely excited to see from that where the next book goes, and hopefully it keeps the pace of that last 50 pages. Overall, I thought this was a great first book in a series, though I did find it a little draggy, and it was very culturally rich, which I think is its main selling point. It's definitely something I would recommend this for. So as I mentioned at the start of this video, I gave The City of Brass 4 stars, and I really enjoyed it. Let me know down below if you've read this book and what you thought of it. I'd love to chat with you about it. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon with another video. Bye!